Welcome to the training webinar. I'm Dale Franks. It's good to be back with you again today. An administrative note, this is going to be our final training webinar of the year, indeed our final webinar of any type of the year. I'll look forward to seeing you again we're not going to be doing it on the 2nd, so it's going to be what is 2 plus 7? The 9th. I think the 9th of January is our next webinar. I have jury duty starting tonight, so I'll be calling in to see if I actually have to show up tomorrow morning and every morning for the next week. And then, of course, we enter the holiday season. So this is going to be our last hurrah for 2024. So just keep that in mind on your schedules. I believe I've deleted all of the webinars until January the 9th, so we should be good to go, and I'll look forward to seeing you after this session in, I guess, three more weeks. So today we're going to talk about the responsive layout controls. I'm going to share my screen. And before we can even talk about the responsive layout controls, we have to talk about some setup that you have to do on your Process Director installation. So as we go through this today, this is not a topic that we discuss much because of the nature of the responsive layout controls, which I'll explain in a few minutes. So if you do have any questions, hit the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window, so that you can type in the question, I'll see it, and I'll respond to those questions as they come in, assuming, of course, that you have any questions at all. Let's talk about the prerequisites, and let's actually talk about what the responsive layout controls are. There is a CSS framework called Bootstrap. This is the documentation for it. I need to change the size of my screen here. There we go. So it fills up the Zoom window. So this is the documentation for Bootstrap. It is at getbootstrap.com. Bootstrap is a CSS and styling framework that we have implemented in Process Director for those who wish to use it. Bootstrap was originally part of, I believe, Twitter, back in 2010, 2012, and the way that they had it, the way that their styling was set up. And what they did is they just open sourced it and released Bootstrap into the world, so that people could just use it to design websites. It became an HTML and CSS framework. We'll explain more about how the framework works in detail in a little bit, but the documentation is at getbootstrap.com. I wouldn't go too deep into the documentation, because the documentation assumes that you're going to be working inside a standard HTML page, which you kind of are in Process Director, but there are some specific constraints that are unique to Process Director. One of the important things to remember, though, about Bootstrap is that it is built on a control architecture that consists of rows, and you can have as many rows as you like on a page, and columns, and each row can have its own number of columns. We usually think of rows and columns in terms of a table where everything is symmetrical. Bootstrap doesn't work that way. You can have up to 12 columns in any row. But you don't have to have 12 columns. You can have 3, you can have 2, you can have 5, you can have 9. It doesn't really matter. Each row has its own set of columns, and they're all parsed by your browser for display individually. I don't want to get too deep into an explanation of Bootstrap. You really do need to understand the basic Bootstrap architecture before you use the responsive layout controls. And if you want to understand that architecture, the documentation is at getbootstrap.com. The really important thing to remember is that Bootstrap is built around the rows and columns layout architecture. So you can have as many rows as you want in your HTML document or your process director form. And each row can have between 1 and 12 columns, and it's entirely up to you how many columns that you want. But what it enables you to do is to create what is kind of a table structure, and yet each row can have varying numbers of columns, up to 12 per row. And you can just sort of mix and match so that you are not confined, as you generally are with a table, with symmetrical numbers of columns, so that if I say I want a 4-column table, every row is going to have 4 columns. Technically, in the Online Form Designer, you can merge table columns on different rows, and you can kind of make asymmetrical tables. But it's not a perfect way to do the layout, and I'll show you why. So if we go into a process director form and I create just a table. So let's just say I want a table with, and I'm going to make a larger number of rows here. So we'll just say 6 rows, and we'll go with, let's go with 6 rows. Well, not 2 columns, sorry. Let's go with, okay, can you give me 6 columns? Thank you very much. And we'll just create that table. And let me go ahead and close the design console so that we can sort of see the table spread out over the page. Now, I can do some merging, and so I can make asymmetrical rows in my document technically, because all I really have to do is go to cell and merge cells, and then I can go down here and I can merge these cells, and I can go up to this row and merge these cells. And we'll go to this row and merge these 3 cells. And so now that they're merged, I'm going to give them a little bit of a background color. So I'm just going to sort of randomly color these things. Oh, I can't do that. I have to go into cell properties. Okay, well, I hope it's clear enough that we can see from the table itself. So what I've got is I've got 1, 2 columns here, and then I've got this 3rd column, and then this row has all 6 columns. This row has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns, and so forth. One thing that you'll note, though, is that even though I can merge cells, I still have to merge cells within the existing column structure, right? So yes, I can merge this cell right here. Well, there we go. So I can merge that cell, and it can take up 3 columns. But notice where the column breaks are consistent all across the table. For example, I've got this vertical line right here. That is where the column break is. And so anytime I merge cells, so, up here where I've merged these 2 cells, that's great, but I still have column breaks here and here. Those column breaks are fixed. So I can sort of make asymmetric tables in the Online Form Designer. However, I still have to live within the structure of the table itself. So while I can merge columns, all of the unmerged column breaks remain exactly where they are on every single row. Bootstrap doesn't work like that. Bootstrap allows me to freely put however many columns I want in each row, and each row will have its own column breaks, and each column will have its own unique width. And so it gives me a lot more advantages in terms of how I want to structure my form, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The controls for the Bootstrap implementation all appear in the responsive layout controls menu. And the first thing you're going to think is, well, wait a second, I don't see a responsive layout controls menu in Process Director. If I open up my online form designer, that menu doesn't exist. That is probably true for most of you because there is a specific custom variable that must be set to display the responsive layout controls. They are not available by default in Process Director. So the f-include bootstrap custom variable has to be set to true to turn the responsive layout controls on in the online form designer. Otherwise, they don't show up. This is by design because we do understand that while some of you may be HTML, CSS gurus, and so you're perfectly happy to work in Bootstrap and its availability makes sense to you, great, you can turn it on and you can use it. If you're not a Bootstrap person and you don't understand how the CSS framework works, which is probably going to be most customers, then you really don't want to see the responsive layout controls because you're never going to use them, at least not until such time as you decide that you want to learn Bootstrap to make them work. So this has to be turned on in your custom variables file. If you're a cloud customer and you don't have access to your custom variables file via an SFTP account, then you can simply submit a tech support ticket if you want these controls turned on. Tell us to, alter the VARs file for your development or staging or production system so that the responsive layout controls can be turned on and that you can use them. And we'll be happy to do that for you. I or any of the implementers can open up the VARs file, change that for you. And once you change it, the responsive layout controls will just automatically appear inside your Process Director installation. All right, so that's the background. Once I have it, then we have to figure out how to use it. Now, I am not going to teach you everything about Bootstrap today. I'm going to teach you the basics of how to use Bootstrap. At least I'm going to try. The system that I am using today is a bleeding edge version of 6.1.300. So I already know one thing that is going to be wonky, and I'll point it out when we see it when we look at the other form. Not everything is displaying perfectly on this machine. Again, this is a version that's in development. It's a version of 6.1.300. It just happens to be from day before yesterday, the most recent main branch of 6.1.300. So there's a little wonkiness in this. And there's no instability, I don't think, but there is a little wonkiness in the way some things show, particularly drop-down controls. They're not tall enough. I'm not sure why. Something has gone on that is interfering with the CSS. So we're not going to get a perfect look at it, but we are going to at least be able to use the controls. There's a couple of basic things that you need to remember about the use of responsive layout, which is that the very first, there's two things that you have to know right off the bat. Before you do anything, the first thing you need to know is, well, wait a second, this is starting to end up like nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. The three things that you need to know. First of all, the responsive layout controls are not Process Director controls. They don't have their own properties. There's nothing that you can do to edit them. I'm going to open up the design console and for the moment, I'm going to go ahead and close my content list, give us some screen space here. So these controls that we're about to look at don't have properties that you can mess around with over here in the design console, right? They're not process director controls, and so they don't work that way. So that's something to keep in mind. Second thing to keep in mind, you have to first place a container, which is the outer bootstrap container control, onto the page, or none of this works and everything goes higgledy-piggledy. So you have to have a container first, and we'll go ahead and we'll stick that container onto the form. We have a couple of types of containers built in here. There are actually 3 in Bootstrap. We support 2. There's the container and the container fluid. I don't like container fluid much, and I don't like it much whenever I'm using regular Bootstrap. Container is a fixed width container that is 1,000 pixels wide and that you can build inside this container. You have to have a container control on the form before you do anything else inside of Bootstrap. The second container control is the container fluid. Now, this control is a little different. It does not have a fixed width. And what it does is it implements, just like we do with tables in Process Director automatically for responsiveness purposes, it implements a varying width. It resizes itself based on the size of the screen. Building forms with the container fluid control, personally, I find difficult to do, because you really don't have a design that you can rely on to show up the way that you want on the user's screen. If you were just writing a text HTML page, I think the container fluid would be fine. In fact, I would probably prefer it for that purpose. But every time the screen size changes, there are just a bunch of breakpoints in the container fluid where it reformats itself, and it basically resizes everything inside the container to sort of match that particular screen size. If you're just doing text, that's probably fine. In fact, I'd probably prefer it. But for a form where you tend to want to put controls together because they're kind of related, it gets really difficult with the container fluid control to have at least some sort of canonical look for your form. So I tend not to like it because it just resizes and reformats everything way too frequently at tiny increments of screen size. So it makes it really hard to get an attractive form out of that, where things are formatted kind of the way you want to see them. And so the container control gives me some measure of control because I have this 1,000 pixel width container. And that 1,000 pixels is gonna work for pretty much any modern monitor. I don't have to worry about if somebody has, like I do, a 32-inch widescreen monitor and they open up a form and it takes, 32 inches of the screen. I don't have to worry about my form as I would with container fluid, just deciding, oh, well, my form is now 32 inches wide and all of my controls being on a single row on the form. That would be ugly. I know that my max width of my form is going to be 1,000 pixels. So I can play around with this 1,000 pixel wide design palette, and I can at least put things inside that 1,000 pixel design palette where they're supposed to be. So that means whenever my form opens, in most cases on any modern screen, because I can't imagine there's anybody around who's still running a 1024 by 768 monitor. But even if there was, my form would show up fine on that monitor because I have my 1000 pixel max width. So I can design to that width. Obviously, I can't fix the problem of what happens if I'm looking at this on a phone in portrait mode and my screen is tiny, narrow. It's only like 650 or 760 pixels wide. I know that for narrow screens, there's going to be some reformatting. The nice thing is that reformatting will probably at that size just throw everything into a single column, which everybody pretty much expects because of how phones work and how narrow the screens are. And so I don't really have to worry too much about what happens if somebody looks at my form on some viewport that is less than 1000 pixels wide. That's a responsive issue. People understand that narrower screens, things are going to reformat most likely to a single column, especially on a phone. That's expected behavior. What I have to worry about is what happens if somebody opens up my form on a much larger monitor, even a 1920 by 1080 monitor, just a plain old HD 16 by 9 monitor set to 1920 by 1080, which I think is pretty much the standard now, even on 15-inch laptops. Well, my form is going to go to 1920 pixels wide if my form is that big, and expanding the size of my design palette just throws everything off and makes everything wonky, or at least it makes my controls very widely spaced apart. So I like the container control. That's the number 2 thing I wanted to talk about. Now, the number 3 thing is that you need to know where you are going and what your final form is going to look like and how you want it designed kind of before you begin. Because once you begin throwing these bootstrap controls on the page, they're hard to remove. So if you really mess up the design, you kind of gotta cancel out of where you are and go back in and reopen it from your last save point. Which I guess brings up the 4 main weapons in our inventory of responsive layout controls. This really is turning into the Spanish Inquisition. The 4th thing, save often. So whenever you're throwing in and I know we kind of tend to forget to do that whenever we're just slapping a table on and we're dropping controls in and we just sort of cowboy our way through the form. Don't do that whenever you're dealing with responsive layout, because of the difficulty of making changes once you start throwing these controls on the form. Why is it so difficult? Well, note, I'm inside my container control, and over here on the right-hand side of the screen, there is nothing showing because there are no properties, there are no process director properties for these controls. These are just layout controls that are prepackaged little boxes. And in fact, they don't even have any sort of unique identity, even if we looked all the way down to the very, very bottom of the screen. All we would see is this div element here, because at the end of the day, that's all any of the bootstrap controls are. They're div elements. And we're nesting div elements inside of div elements. And so it may be difficult to know which element you're looking at. And if you really want to make any changes, what you generally have to do, if you know HTML, is something that we would prefer that you never do, which is to open the HTML source of the page and edit that HTML source directly. Now, I don't have any controls on this page. I only have a container control. So now my HTML is really simple. What I have is I've got a div control, which uses the container and BP editor styles. That container is the bootstrap style that defines what a container is. And then of course I have my end div tag. Okay, sure. This is great. This is easy to edit because it's only 3 lines of HTML. Once we start throwing controls on the form, this is going to get really difficult to edit and to fix if we do something wrong, we stick in the wrong kind of control, or we don't like how this row looks. So my suggestion would be that you save often, save your progress, just hit Control S or click the Save Form button. So every time you put a new row in and you're happy with that row, save the form. That way, when you put in the next row, if you blow everything up on that row, the easiest thing to do would just be to start that row again. You just exit without saving, discard your changes, and then open the form back up in the online form designer, and the row that you had just saved, that's still going to be there. You're going to be fine. And then you can work on hitting that second row and reconfiguring that row with the appropriate objects on that row. So just something to keep in mind. Well, the 4 things to keep in mind whenever you are working with this control. There is some unavoidable wonkiness in how the controls work as we begin to build out my structure. Now, I have a form that is complete. We're actually going to go through and take a look at some different types of implementations. So we're not going to get super in depth in building a responsive layout form. I have one built. We'll take a look at that in a few minutes. There's just a couple of things that you need to know about building. Your primary layout controls that you are going to use to build any sort of form. Remember, I said that the architecture is row and column based. So for the row object, because we are using forms and we are building data entry forms, the appropriate object to insert into your container to build your first row, and indeed every subsequent row, is the form row control. But before we insert the control, let's take a look and be sure we know where our cursor is. So our cursor is right there. Oh, and by the way, 1 container control, not 2, not 5, not 3, 1 container control goes on your form. Multiple container controls, no bueno. So you can have multiples of everything else, but only 1 container control per page. So we've got our container control. Now we want to insert our form row control to throw in our first row. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be a form row control if we are not going to be inserting data entry controls into that row. It is quite possible that you might want a header row. And if so, there is a regular row control, but we would only want to put text in a row control. And so if we wanted to do a text row, then we could in fact put in a row control. And then for however many columns we want, 1 or more, we would then need to drop in a column control into that row. And so there is 1 column control. And notice my cursor is now inside my row control. And if I wanted to drop in another column, since my cursor is inside the row, that's where it's blinking. It's blinking in the green bit. So I can just go ahead and drop in another column, and indeed another column, and indeed another column, however many I want. So in this case, I now have a 4-column row. And then I can go in and put in any text I want inside the columns themselves. I can use paragraphs or whatever. Now I've got my text formatted however it's going to be formatted whenever it shows up. I've got my 4 columns and I'm fine. But I would only use the row and the column controls if I'm dropping in text. Now I need to put in another row, and I'm going to put in some form controls. For that, I need to use 2 different responsive layout controls. Row and column, great for text, not great for forms. So I want you to note that there are these insert paragraph here controls that pop up everywhere. And that's not where I wanted that control. I wanted that control right here, not below my container. It needs to be inside my container. And I need to click that. And the reason I need to click it is I need to create a new row. I really shouldn't use that term. I need to create a new vertical break to give me the room to put in a new row inside my container. When I hit my add new row, which doesn't appear because I've added a new paragraph, notice it throws my cursor way out here. I don't want my cursor way out there. I don't want any text way out there. That is outside of my container, and that is going to be super ugly if I put any content there. So I definitely don't want to be there. I want to get rid of all of that. So I don't want to click the insert paragraph here icon at this point, because that's going to take me outside of my control. Remember, I said it's kind of wonky putting this stuff in. It's kind of wonky. So where these paragraph controls show up, it will insert a paragraph. I don't really want to insert a paragraph here. That's not a good place. And of course, now that I've inserted this paragraph inside the container, the appropriate insert paragraph mark doesn't show up. But I need to be in the next row to actually insert my form controls, let's say. So instead of a row and column control, because I am going to put form controls here, I need to use 2 different responsive layout controls. I need the form row and the form group control to build my next row, which contains my form controls. So I'm going to throw in a form row. Now, normally what I would have done is just run up here and chosen form group, but note my cursor automatically came down to this next vertical break here on the page to allow me to put in another row, which, by the way, I could. I'm inside, my cursor is inside the container control. So the thing that I would want to insert here would be either another row control if I had text, or another form row if I had form controls that I wanted to place in here. So I want to be sure before I enter my form group controls that my cursor is inside the green area, so that that's where my new controls will go. And again, notice any of these controls that I click into where I can place my cursor, there's no properties. But if we go here and I've placed my cursor inside here. Again, let's look at the very bottom of the page and see what it shows me. Div, div, div. So I am 3 divs deep into this layout that I have using all of these controls are all HTML div controls, all of the responsive layout controls. That doesn't tell me a bunch. And, clicking on that div does tell me, okay, well, now I know what that level is. Clicking on that div takes me up one level. Well, I got out of it. That takes me up to my container level. That takes me down to my row level. And if I clicked on the third div, that would select my column. So I can kind of click on these objects at the bottom to select a particular element. So at the top level, if I select that div there, it'll give me my entire container control. So let's go in and put in our form groups, and we'll just drop a couple in here. So we go to responsive layout, and we're dropping in form group controls. And these are very special controls. In fact, the form row and the form group are special because they automatically apply, specific formatting to make forms work a little bit better and look a little bit better. And they automatically sort of change where your labels and controls appear. So if I drop in a label control inside one of my form groups, and as you can see, I've thrown in 3 form groups. Note, unlike the column controls, and again, with the column controls, we're really just worried about text. There's no space between the columns, but a form group control inside its form row already has some spacing that is going to be applied automatically. You don't really have any control over this, and you don't want control over it, or you wouldn't use Bootstrap in the first place. The whole point of Bootstrap is to take all of the worries about layout and spacing and control styling and all of that other stuff. It takes it off of the table for you. All you have to worry about is being able to put the right controls in the right places, and all of the styling just happens, well, not by magic, but it just happens automatically, because that's the whole point of Bootstrap, is to do all of that styling for you so that you don't have to worry about it. And so you'll just note that the form group controls and the column controls are presented, even in the UI here, in noticeably different ways, because it's already, even in the online form designer, throwing in some minimal styling into the OFD, which shows up as a visual difference in where these div tags are appearing on the page. So now inside a form group, the first thing I can do is insert a label control. We always recommend if you're going to be using Bootstrap, I'm going to assume that accessibility and responsiveness is super important to you. So therefore, we're going to not just put text in, we're going to put in actual label controls. And so we're going to call this label 1, and I guess we'll call this field 1. Well, it's the text. I can do that. And I'll have an associated control ID, which I think I'm just going to call text 1, because I don't know what automatic name is going to be given for my control. So I've put that control in there, and now I'm going to insert just a regular old text box. And I want you to notice what has happened here. First of all, it's a big honking text box. There's some things about Bootstrap that I'm not super keen on. One of them is the enormous size of the controls that they want to display for data entry. It reminds me of some sort of kindergarten or first grade, my first form sort of styling. It's very big. But I don't want you to notice that what it has done, has automatically placed the control on a new row below the label control. This happens automatically. It is consistent across every form group, so it will automatically perform that styling for you as well. Now, I did say we wanted to call this text 1. So we will call it text 1. And the reason we're calling it text 1 is obviously because in my label control, I said that would be the name of the control. So we'll go through here, and I'm just going to replicate this a couple of times for reasons that'll remain obvious in a second. So let's go in here and drop in another label control. We'll call it text 2, and the associated control ID will be text 2. Great. And now we've got our label control. We'll drop in let's not use a checkbox. Let's use a date picker. So I probably should have called it, date 2 or something, but fine. Our names aren't really important at this point. And then we'll go to our third one, and we'll do this one more time. So we'll drop in a label control, and the associated control ID will be text 3. And then we'll drop in our, let's drop in another text box. It doesn't really matter what the control is. Text 3. Here's the reason now I've got some controls. I've got some text columns in here as well. So it's still a super simple form, at least it looks like it from here, until we hit the source control. Even with the form as simple as it is, putting controls on the form makes the HTML view much harder to understand. Now, all of my controls are still there. So here is my div class form group. And I know that there is some other stuff in here, but you know, I've got my span class and this is this control span BP date picker. Then I've got another P control here. And okay, here's my next form group. And so where's that div tag that ends it? It's right here. It gets difficult to understand this HTML. And I'll fully admit, largely our fault, because these control field properties take up a lot of room on the online form designer. And they're very complex, and there's a lot of stuff encoded here. It makes understanding the HTML difficult. So the idea that even if you're an HTML guru, well, you know what? I can just pop over into the source code and I can just change my form. Hey, I've only got one row of controls on this form. Imagine how complex this thing is going to get when I have 10 rows with 4 columns each. And I'm now trying to figure out how 40 different form controls are displayed on the page. And if I want to move things around, it's going to be difficult, even if you're an HTML guru, to go into source and just try to move things around. And if you're not an HTML guru, your chances of doing that and being able to, you know, fix some mistake that you have made in the control is going to be more difficult. Now, happily, there are some things that you can fix. Like if I pick this div tag here, and I hit delete, I can actually delete that entire set of columns. And I can also delete, I think, if I check that, I think I can delete that whole div tag. At least I'm trying to. That div tag is kind of hard to delete. And this, by the way, illustrates why these controls are sort of hard to work with. Okay, well, now I've deleted too much. And so I've pulled in my form row. So I am going to have to go into my source row, and I need to pull that row control off of here. Now that I've deleted everything inside it, it is at least a little easier to find. And so there we go. I've gotten rid of my div control, but as you can see, it's not convenient to go back in and try to change things. The easiest thing to do would just be to save this form after I've created a row and that row looks the way I want, and then just move to the next row. And if I mess that up, I can just close the form without saving it, reopen it, and start all over. Now, that doesn't solve the problem that I just had, which is I have saved my form and I liked it when I first created it. And now I don't like having this row up here. And so I can delete part of it. I can certainly select that div tag, which will highlight everything in the columns, and I can delete that all at once, fell swoop. But I've still got that empty row control, and trying to delete it out of the UI is a bit of a pain. So what I might be able to do, so I go in here and insert a paragraph, and now I've got my cursor there. Let's see if I can backspace my way into it. No, I cannot backspace my way into it. Uh, See, this is a pain. And so know what your form is going to look like and where you are going with your design and layout before you even start. The whole idea of Bootstrap is to make the design of HTML simpler. And I think there's an argument to be made that it can be simpler designing forms with Bootstrap because you really only have to know how to do three things: stick a container on the page, stick a form row on the page, and then stick a form group on the page. And if you can figure that out, you can make forms all day long. You lose a lot of freedom with how things look. So the drawback here but the drawback here is not with Bootstrap itself, but with how it has to be implemented in the online form designer. We are kind of limited. The online form designer is itself a third-party component called the CK editor. It comes from CK editor that's pretty widely used in almost any sort of form building application that exists on the internet. Although, some companies like Microsoft and IBM have gone the roll your own method for their form designers, but they all tend to work in a similar way because HTML works in a similar way. So we're sort of constrained in terms of the UI that we can provide to you by the constraints of the CK editor control, which makes editing these forms a bit of a pain. Something else to keep in mind. I've created my form. I'm happy with it. I like it. I've published it. Everybody's been using it for months and they're super happy with it and they love the way it works. And now, we need to go back in and change the form. We need to delete some stuff, add some new things. Maintenance on these forms, if there are going to be changes over time, it's going to be a little bit of a pain. If you don't know Bootstrap and you don't know HTML enough to be comfortable enough to pop over to this source tab and to be able to make sense out of what's going on here, any form that you create in the responsive layout controls, if you're not a Bootstrap, CSS, HTML person, is just going to be a more painful exercise than you're going to wish to engage in. And that's just the reality of using this extra framework. You have to know the framework and you have to work within the constraints that are available in Process Director. Now, if you're happy with that, you go to town on responsive layout controls. In fact, we try to give you a little bit of a head start on that I've saved this form. I guess I didn't really need to save it. But, having done so, I might as well complete saving it. We'll go to the content list and let's take a look at the template library that we talked about last week. Now, I didn't talk about this last week. I kind of elided past it. But there's not in this one, unfortunately, but in several of them. I thought most of them had one. I'm surprised that didn't have one. Most of our templates have two forms. They have the regular Process Director form that we're used to, and they also have a Bootstrap version of that form that is also available inside the template. So if you prefer to use Bootstrap rather than, tables for layout, not only are you perfectly free to do that, but in terms of the templates that we provide you in the template library, we pretty much have, I think in most of these, we have Bootstrap forms already done for you that already look like the normal Process Director forms. So you can go in and use the Bootstrap forms and make whatever changes you want to make for them if you're comfortable in using it. Now, I do know that we have customers that are using responsive layout and building forms with responsive layout, but the people who are doing so tend to be pretty good HTML and CSS people. There are several controls with the responsive layout controls that are also kind of cool to use. And what I've done is I've built this responsive layout form. And if anybody wants this form, ask me for it, and I'll, export it and zip it up and send it to you. So let's take a look at this pre-built form that I've created. And while we're at it, let's just go ahead and get rid of the content list where we want to be. Let's look at this form. So what we're really building inside our forms is a mixture of the normal process director controls that you're used to sticking on forms, and then these weird div tags that you're sticking on to provide the layout for your forms. So as I showed you a few minutes ago, I can throw in a row, and if I'm using a row control, I generally throw in a column. Now, fun fact, I don't necessarily have to throw in a column. I can just toss in an H1 onto a row and it will work just fine. I think technically I should throw in a column control, even though it's a single column control, to make that work the way that I want it to work. But sort of H1 is one of those weird HTML elements that are kind of its own. It's not really a div tag, but it gets treated like a div tag in certain ways, in that it has its own margins that are different from normal text. It sort of is a container control for text. So I think one can make an argument that I did this slightly wrong, and I'm willing to accept that argument. Technically, I think what I probably should have had here instead of an H1 is a column control, and then I could have put my H1 form title text inside the column. So, sue me. But for all of my controls, what I'm going to use are form rows and form groups. I'm just going to let them take care of all of the styling. So stick in a form row, throw in as many form groups as you need for that row to make the appropriate number of columns. And then inside each form group, you place your individual labels and your individual data controls. Doesn't matter what kind of control they are. They're all going to show up like this with the label immediately displayed above the control for which that label is associated. And everything is just going to work exactly the way that you want it to work. Now, Process Director has its own container controls, the most important of which are the section controls. Using section controls inside responsive layout is a little bit different. Because what I want to do is I want to put the section controls inside the container itself. Remember, the container is the outer container control. Technically, form rows and form groups are their own div controls. Section controls are their own div container controls. So I can actually do things sort of two ways here, which I'm demonstrating on this form. I can just throw a section control, as I've done for this first section, inside the container itself. So this control just exists inside the container with its own rich, independent life, and it gets treated like a section control or like a row control or any other, outside container control, because the row and the columns aren't the only container controls that exist in Bootstrap. We'll talk about that a little bit later. There's a couple that I've dropped down here to this form, and we'll talk about them and look at them in a little bit. But on the process director side, the section and the embedded section controls are the two major containers. So if I want the section control to be a major part of the form, and I often do, right? We might have a section that says, request info, and then another section that says, approval section. And so I might have multiple sections on my form where I am segregating out my different types of controls or categories of controls, because at different parts of the process, for example, whenever a new form instance opens, I want to hide the approval section. There's no reason for the initial requester to see an approval section that doesn't relate to them, that they can't fill out, that nobody should be filling out because no request exists. All I really want to show is the section that has the request info, right? So in that case, I would throw a section directly inside the container. Inside the section, because remember, the section is nothing more than a div control, just like all of the Bootstrap controls. So it is a container which I can throw other div controls inside. And in this case, because I'm going to display form fields, then inside my section, my process director section control, I'm just going to throw in my form row. And inside the form row, as I've done here, I'm just going to throw in two form groups to display those two controls inside the section. And they'll display fine. Let me go a little further. I've also got an embedded section control here. So immediately below the section control, and in fact, I think it only shows up below the section control. I think I inserted it right here at the very end of the section control. So whenever you do that and you're dealing with embedded sections, like if you put an embedded section end right outside of a table, it always shows up on the row below the table. That's just for convenience sake. It's not really going to show up that way in the actual form when it runs, but that's just for convenience sake to be able to, grab that control and look at it on its own line inside the online form designer. But I've got an embedded section control here, and the way that this embedded section control works is it actually has a little condition on it where if the check hide is not checked, the field is visible. So I've got this embedded section control that I want to show and hide based on the value of this hide stuff control up here at the top. Inside that embedded section, and an embedded section is no different than a regular process director section control, other than the fact that the embedded section has no visible representation on the page. The only placeholder for it at all that you'll ever see is the black square bracket for opening and closing that control. Now, again, note, I've placed the embedded section control directly inside the responsive layout container, and that embedded section control goes all the way down to here, where there is, again, an end embedded section control, or I guess embedded section end control is its correct name. And that is also inside the container. But this is going to work just like any other embedded section control where I am setting it to show and hide based on what I've done here on my checkbox. It's just going to hide all of these other controls. Now, I do want to say one more thing about the section controls, which is even though I have put them inside the container control itself, and I want to because both of these are going to be top-level containers. So we really do have to think whenever we're using the responsive layout controls in terms of containers that go on our form. And I've done something which is not good here, so we're going to have to close this thing out and reopen it to run it properly. So forgive me for that. But as I was saying, even though these sections that I've placed on the form are outside section controls, and you'll have to forgive me. I seem to have moved my mouse onto the other monitor and I've completely lost where my mouse was. I don't need to necessarily put those sections at the container level because containers are containers. So I can stick a section control really anywhere that I need it. So inside my embedded section, the very first thing I've done is I've thrown in a form row and a form group. I didn't really need to do that. I could have thrown in a row and a column control. I didn't do it for formatting reasons, and I'll explain that in just a second. But inside each of these form group controls, I can also place a section control. Now, all I've done is thrown some text into these controls. But I could replicate this top section here where inside the section itself, I've got a form row and a form group. Because I can sort of stack these container controls right on top of each other, and I can nest them as deep as I want. You probably don't want to nest things too deep because you simply won't have enough horizontal space at the end of the day with only 1,000 pixels here to play with. So there's a limit there to how deep you want to go to nesting these containers. But the point is you can, because they're all container controls. So the section control can be at the level of the container or just below the container level, or it can be further down inside a form group and can itself have its own form row and form group controls inside the section itself. So this does provide a lot of flexibility. Now, there's a lot of other stuff on this form that we need to talk about, but for now, first, let's just close the form because I don't know what I might have messed up. So I would like to discard the changes and close the form editor. And in fact, since I'm already here, let me just go ahead and run the responsive layout form control from here because I think it'll run faster. And that's one of the reasons why I hate working on this server, because I have not adjusted the size of forms when they open like I have on my normal training server. So forgive me while I resize this thing. So here's my control. I have all of these sections down here, or all of these other controls down here, which we'll take a look at in a few minutes. But remember, a lot of this stuff is in this embedded section control that we just looked at. And section control obviously doesn't have a visual representation on the page. I tell you what does have a visual representation on the page. When I click hide stuff, it hides stuff. So the two section controls that existed in that immediate row below, those are gone. The accordion section controls that are in here, those are bootstrap sections. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Those all go away because I have shown and hid the embedded section control based on my selection on that checkbox. So these section controls here are a little bit different, but we'll talk about them next. But my show, my hide works. Everything appears the way that it's supposed to appear. We're all happy, except on this particular version. This is one thing you can see. We can't see select one here. And note that these are all the normal height for text boxes. It shouldn't actually look like this in Bootstrap. So in this particular version of .300 that I'm working on, this development version, there's something wonky happening here. What we should be seeing, since I can pop open the dev tools and I can do this, let me just check my drop-down control, and I can go in and just make a bit of a change if I can find it. Border right bottom. Where is height? Height. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, height, 26 pixels. And I think this needs to be, can I change it here? Oh, I can't change it there. I think I got to go here and change it right there. So let's take this from 26 to 36. And I hit 66. So that's clearly wrong. So I'm going to go to 36. So that's how it's supposed to look. This is supposed to be, I think, 36 pixels high. And oh, by the way, that text control here, actually, all of these controls are supposed to be that height. So, uh, like I said, there's some wonkiness going on here that needs to be fixed to make each of these controls work, but that's what it should look like. And now that I've clicked on it, it has reset back to that 26 instead of 36 pixels. So there's something is happening here, but that's part of the wonkiness I was talking about whenever we first started. All right, great. Well, that works fine. So let's go back to our responsive layout form and open it back up in design view and talk about a couple of the other controls. Now, so far, we have talked about process director section controls. Bootstrap has its own section controls, which, by the way, work just fine. In fact, there's kind of two different types of section controls. But one is called the card and header, and one is called the accordion. And either one works. They work a little bit differently. So this is the card header. Well, this is actually the accordion control here. So I guess I was wrong. There's accordion, and then you have the accordion content. So what I've done is I've thrown a card control on, and then thrown in an accordion. Or is that what I've done? Now I've forgotten how I set this up exactly and what control this was. I believe this is the accordion. There's the accordion and the accordion tab. One of the reasons why it gets a little confusing is that there is a main control called a card in Bootstrap, and that card has some subtypes. The accordion group. So I get them confused as to which one is which. We can go back to my other form. We can insert them and see which is which, and we should probably do that because I want to actually replicate what it was that I did here. As you can tell, I don't use these controls very often myself. So I think it's accordion. So that gives me accordion tab 1 and accordion tab 2. Okay, so that's accordion, and oops. See, there's accordion and accordion content. An accordion content would go in here, and it throws in the accordion content goes inside another section control, but it is the accordion control. That's the important thing to remember. This section is basically called an accordion control. So the accordion control is basically a section control, and it's a collapsing section, just like the one that we put in Process Director. So having done that, now let's go back to our responsive layout form now that I've figured out which control is which. And we'll go back into this form. So what I've basically got is accordion controls here that I have thrown in to, in this case, just in the container control itself. So when you throw in an accordion inside the container control, it basically works as a section. And so therefore, I can show and hide simply by clicking on the link. all of the controls that are in there. And by the way, it works in the online form designer, which is really cool because our normal section control, which basically does the same kind of thing, doesn't work in the online form designer. Now, when I run the form, the Bootstrap section works a little bit differently than the Process Director section. Now, all of the other things for making the section work have to be done properly. So, but let's take a look at how it works here, because now we're out of the online form designer. We'll have to go back. So I've got section 1 and section 2, and that's how these controls work. I kind of like the animation that's on them. By the way, these are also accordions, but they're down in another section, but we'll look at those a little bit later. Our section controls just kind of, well, they do two things. First of all, they refresh the page, and they also, show and hide themselves just on page refresh. So they basically appear and disappear. I really super like the amount of animation that I have available for these controls. And it all happens on the screen, which I think is really cool. And notice that both of these sections exist inside the outer section for this particular card control. The control is called a card, and there are different implementations of card: the accordion tab, but you can play around with these and see the differences, but they all have the same sort of animation. They all kind of work in the same way. The accordion tab controls, and note the bottom of the form will automatically resize. I'm pointing at it with my finger, like you can see that. Let's look at the bottom of the form here. Maybe I should highlight it so that you can see it on screen. So look at this. If I open up the accordion tabs, oh, look, the bottom of my form, it all just scrolls down. Now, I have this container here that contains accordion tabs 1 and 2, and this one over here, accordion tabs 1 and 2. So those heights are going to be kind of fixed. So it's only going to show me one of these things at a time. But the nice thing is, whenever the animation works, the bottom of the page, which are completely separate controls, completely unrelated to these section controls, notice it all just makes the entire page resize. This is one of the nice things about the responsive layout controls. They're attractive. They're simple. They're completely flat design, so completely away from the sort of skeuomorphic design of the 90s and early 2000s. And they just work in a harmonious fashion on the page without having to worry about page refreshes and all of that other stuff. There's a lot of JavaScript running to make all of that happen. So, there's that. So they're not as lightweight, because I've got to pull basically all of the responsive layout framework. But in terms of styling, they're super nice to use. So here are my accordion controls. Now, again, in the accordion body, I do have my form row and my form group controls that contain my controls. Again, got to use that form row and that form group. Which reminds me, let me come back up here. I was going to mention this and I forgot. So let me roll back and talk about it. I don't necessarily have to use, again, if I'm going to throw this section in here and I have all of this text, I don't really have to use the form row and the form group controls to display these. I only used them because I liked the styling and I wanted the break between the two controls. Because if I'd used a row and column controls, I wouldn't have got the same styling, and I wouldn't have been sure that I had this 10 pixel break between my two section controls. So because I used the form group and form row controls, I can take advantage of sort of the pre-built styling that they include in how they appear in the layout to give myself a little more control over how things appear than I would with the regular row and column controls. So I could have used either here. There would have just been a slight difference. I would have had to configure my section controls a little bit differently. For example, on the formatting, I probably would have had to add a CSS style to set them to, I don't know, 95% of the container width. Certainly could have done it. Wouldn't have been that hard. It would have just been slightly tedious to do it. But I don't have to do it if I use the form group and the form row controls as opposed to the form and column controls. So I'm just sort of leveraging the differences in how those two sets of containers work to make my life easier for building my form. So one of the other things that I've done here, now up here with these accordions that we threw in up here, they're at the section or they're at the container level, which means that they're going to take up the entire space of the container and they're going to operate much like section controls do in Process Director. I do have, I guess, a little bit of an argument with how they work in terms of their height. Because I've thrown these two section controls. So basically, I have a card here, and inside that card, in its content, I've dropped in two accordion controls. Now, we're not going to get into details about how to do this and how to format this stuff because you don't want to sit here and watch me for 20 minutes do this kind of formatting. So there's some experimentation as you learn with Process Director how you want to do this. Now, this is all fine and good. And in the design mode, note that I have access to both of the sections. I can open and close them. I can put in as many controls as I want in here. If I'm going to have multiple accordions inside a card control, which I certainly can do, it's only going to show me one section at a time. Now, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it is a thing. It's how they work. And I do want you to notice it's how they work because we're going to see it again when we look down here at these accordion tabs, because what I've done, let me go back here and explain before we show. What I've done is down here, is I've dropped in a form row and then a form and then two form groups. And then inside each of those form groups, I've dropped in a couple of accordions. Now I've dropped in the accordions. Up here, I have this card control. It's kind of hard to see, but this card control is sort of my outer container. And then inside the card control, I dropped two accordions. Down here, I've decided because I want two columns, I've got my form group, or I've got two form groups inside a form row to create my containers into which I just dropped a couple of accordions. So something that you may or may not like on these accordions is that whenever the form first opens, everything is fine. It shows me everything. But once I start playing around with these accordions, note what happens. It gets small here. See, I haven't messed around here, and see how big my container is? If I do this, my container gets super small, and then I can only show one of my accordion tabs at the time. And so notice this behavior. I'm just going to go over the behavior so you can see what happens. I open up accordion tab 2, Great, I see it. I open up Accordion tab 1, and this content is going to flow out of sight. So Accordion tab 1 is open. If I close Accordion tab 1, Accordion tab 2 is also closed. So I'm not a big fan of how what apparently happens is it just switches between those tabs, and I can never go back to having both of these tabs open at the same time. I don't like that. And it happens up here too. If I go to section 2 and section 1, it swaps them off. So because they're inside containers, the behavior is going to be a little wonky. I don't particularly like it. But when you first open up the form, it's not really a problem because everything displays for the user. And it's only when they start going in and begin clicking on these things that you begin to run into a problem. The other thing that's kind of tedious on these controls is that you have to name them. So basically you have to get your cursor inside the links, and then you have to be real careful because you don't want to delete the link, and you got to rename the things so that they don't just say Accordion tab 1 and Accordion tab 2, because they do get dropped down with default names. And so you have to be able to click in. When you click, of course, it makes the expansion and the contraction happen, but you got to click to be able to get up in there to just make whatever edits you need to make to the text so that whenever you rerun the form, and we'll give it a second to open up. So whenever you rerun the form, you can now see it with your new titles. So you're obviously going to want to get rid of all of those, default titles. So you're going to have to edit them manually, which is just a little bit of a pain. But of course, now I've got Accordion and renamed thing. So it all works. And the links work. You just a little tedious with how you have to do that renaming. You know what? I think I'm going to keep this open. That we can go back and look at it. Now down here, I've got another set of controls called the tab and tab content controls. And that works pretty much like the tab and tab content controls do in Process Director. I can just throw in my tabs, and then once I'm in my tab control, I can just start throwing in the tab content controls, however many that I need for that particular tab control. So there's tab 4, and there's tab 5. So now I've got 5 tabs, 2 of which don't have content. And when you throw them in, by the way, you get tab 4 content, tab 5 content, tab 3 content. Obviously, you're going to want to make changes to this stuff, whatever the changes are that you need to make to the text. I could, of course, once again, on a tab, drop in a form row and the appropriate number of form group controls, and then I have all of my tabs running the way that I want them to run. I don't know if it saves me any time to just save the form here and then refresh over just saving the form. Well, before it refreshes, oh, there we go. There's tab 5. There's tab 4. Just magically appeared. Tab 3, tab 2, and of course tab 1, where I've actually got form row and form group controls to throw in my controls properly. Another container control that's kind of cool is the card control. And you can just drop in a card control, and card controls have 3 elements. I really like the card control because when you drop in a card control, you get an image, you get a title, and then you get your card text, whatever the text is. doesn't necessarily have to be text, because you can throw in form rows and form groups inside a card as well. Now, whenever you actually insert a card on a form, and here we'll have to go back to my other form to actually demonstrate it a little bit. So if I can insert a card again anywhere that I want. Remember, we can nest containers over and over and over. I'm going to stick it up at the container level, so it'll just be a second level control, largely for making it large enough to sort of see what's going on here. So we'll go to responsive layout. We got a couple of different things here. We can drop in a card, card and header, and card group. So like for my accordions, I can drop in a card group. That's what I did for the wide accordions, that first section of accordions. You can drop in a card group, and it will automatically give you, 3 cards here, all lined up. That is kind of cool. Let me get rid of it. And then I can drop in a card and header. That's kind of cool. I just get the card and the header. Or I can just drop in the full card control. I think I misspoke. What I did, I think the last time, was I dropped in the full card control. But I edited it a little bit because the full card control is kind of cool. Like I said, it gives me 3 items, all of which are empty whenever I insert it. The first thing we want to talk about is this right here. It has a broken image at the top. Now, the nice thing about the card control is that I can throw in an image. Now, on the other card, I just threw in the BP Logix image, right? Which I guess I'll do again. We'll just go in. It's just an image control. You don't have to use it. You can just delete it and not have an image. And it'll just go away. That'll be fine. But if you want to throw an image there, I certainly don't want that. There it is. Let's just throw in BP logo mark small, and we'll send it to the server. That's way bigger than I want it to be. So we're going to change that width, and we're going to make this thing. Well, actually, we'll do the height because it's wider than it is tall. So we'll just set the height as 36 pixels. And we'll just refresh it, and there we go. Now I've got my little card control there, and somehow I just set it to 200, which I didn't want to do. So once again, let's go back to 36 pixels. I'm happy with that. So now I have my little image, and then I can throw in my card title. This is the title. And then I have my card text. This is the text. So when I run this, as we can see on the other form, and we'll run it off the other form, which I apparently have closed, I've got my card text, title, or my picture, title, and text. These are all technically formatted properly in terms of font and text and size. So that's a caveat we need to talk about, but we'll talk about that in a second. So and this is basically the same thing that I did over here on my existing form. So this is the form that we'll go ahead and run. Let's just run it from the content list because it's already done. So I don't need to worry about saving it. So way down here, that's what the card looks like. I think I set this to 32 on this card. But I've got my nice text here, and I've got the field that shows inside the card. Happy so far, except something to think about is going to be whether you have implemented custom CSS styling on your process director installation, which I know some of you have. Not entirely sure how this is going to look in terms of text, font, size, if you have a custom CSS style sheet on your process director server. Custom CSS is already, sort of fraught with the possibility of conflict with existing process director CSS. And I've seen some customers who have implemented custom CSS style sheets well, and I've seen customers who have implemented them badly. And Bootstrap has its own kind of text styling. What we've done is we've incorporated it into the process director styling. If you have custom style sheets and you're trying to use some of these responsive layout items, especially one like this, which has both an image element, a header element, and a text element, all of which are formatted slightly differently with their own margins and all the other stuff. I don't exactly know how that's going to look on your system. And I don't know, and I guess it depends largely upon how you've created your custom style sheet. I'm not entirely sure whether you're going to run into a conflict in your custom style sheet between the one that gets implemented when you're running these responsive layout controls. Because, yeah, at this point, I have 3 different style sheets. I've got the process director default style sheet. I've got your custom style sheet. And now I've got the style sheet associated with Bootstrap, all of which may or may not determine how that sentence looks. So I can't predict how things are going to look if you're running your own custom style sheet. It's probably not going to work exactly like mine. And look, I've got a moderately complex setup because I've customized my forms, although I haven't on this server. I should pull back on that. This server, I haven't done it. But like on my training server, that's mine, I'm using custom fonts. I'm using Noto Sans for everything. So and I've created those custom styles. I've uploaded Noto Sans to my custom folder, the TTF font file, and I've pointed to that font file with a custom CSS style sheet. It's not much of one, but that's what it says my style is going to be. So I've overwritten process director stuff with my own custom style sheet. So keep in mind, if you have your own custom style sheet, not entirely sure what you're going to see here. For now, we're only going to need to see one more thing, and that is an array. So what I've done is I have dropped in an array control on the very, very bottom of my form. So right below my card. Basically, I've dropped in a form row, and then I've dropped in a single form group. So basically, I've got one column in this row with one form group. Arrays still work the way arrays work, even if you're doing it inside the responsive layout controls. That generally implies that what I have to have is a table, and I have to have a start array control as the very first control in the very first row and first column, and indeed the very first control of the first row and first column of my table. And then I need to have an end array control as the very last control in the very last column of the last row of the array. Now, in most cases, arrays are only one row long. In this case, I have 2 columns, so I have my start array control, which is kind of hard to see, but there it is. It's right there. That's my start array control. It's the first control in column 1. My end array control is the last control in column 2, and I've got both of my controls on the same row. Now, arrays are a little bit wonky sometimes because sometimes I need 2 rows of a table to create a single array row. And so if that is the case, then my end array control would need to be the very last control in column 2 of row 2 of this table. All of the normal array rules apply. So in this case, I have a table. The very first row of the table, I have a couple of system variable controls. both of which are array column controls. So I have my array column with the text set to field 1, and for column 2, I have a separate array column control with the text set to field 2. Again, for responsive layout purposes, if my screen gets a little too narrow, then Process Director will reformat the array table into a single column table. And if we use the array column controls, the array column system variables will automatically reformat themselves to provide the appropriate labels for each of the fields when I'm in that single column format looking at Process Director on a very narrow screen. The second row of my table is where my array actually exists. So I have an array that I have named Array Start 29, which means I didn't name it. I just dropped it onto the page and let Process Director name it. Then I have an input control in column 2 of my table, another input control, and then after that input control, my end array control. That works fine. Then I have a third table row where I have placed my add row button for the array. Please note that this is a big button. There's a reason it is a big button, and I have not set any of that button's properties. The reason that it's a big button is because it is inside a form group, and Bootstrap is now determining how big that button is and what it will look like when the form runs. Because again, I'm using Bootstrap to provide that formatting for my controls for me so that they look proper whenever my form runs. So I can have my array and I can run it inside a form group control. You would not, however, try to spread an array across a form row. It's not going to work the way tables work. The array still has to be inside a table. If you say, okay, well, I'm just going to have, 2 form groups in a form row, and the very first thing I'm going to do is throw in my start array control, and then I'm going to put one control in form group 1. I'm going to put a second control in form group 2, and then I'm going to stick an end array control at the end of form group 2, and everything is just going to work great. That is not true. It will not work great. So what you're going to need to do if you're going to use arrays is to have a single form group column, and then you're still going to have to use the table to make the array work properly, because arrays were originally designed for tables. We would have to redesign that control to make it work for another object. There's about 10,000 reasons why we designed it to work the way that it did. That's the way that it works, so that's how you have to implement it. But assuming that you implement your array in a table inside a single form group column, everything is just going to work the way that you would expect arrays to work. So we'll go ahead and run my form again. I keep promising myself I'm going to keep the form open. I'm just going to swap back and forth because I'm not making any changes to it, and I keep closing the form because I can't help myself, apparently. So here's my array. There's my add row control. So I can just click and I can add as many array rows as I need, even though the controls are very small in terms of their vertical height. I can just add whatever rows I need in my array. It is an array control. It works just as normal. It just happens to be working inside a form group. And I've just closed that form again. But I think it's fine that I closed that form again because, well, I think I'm done talking. So there you go, responsive layout controls. We don't talk about them much. We probably mention them once every 2 years or so. I think I have over the past 7 years talked about them twice. They're not widely used because they do require some, amount of expertise to use properly and some amount of practice as well. But they exist. They do offer some interesting capabilities in a process director form, and they certainly do help in terms of if you're going to start building all of your forms in the responsive layout controls. It is a familiar look and feel for many users because of Bootstrap's wide and sort of ubiquitous popularity, although in the last couple of years, a couple of other frameworks have appeared that seem to be gaining in popularity as well. Have a great holiday. We're not going to talk again until after the new year. So I wish you and your family a wonderful holiday season. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and I will look forward to talking to you once again on the 9th of January. And until then, have a great Christmas. So long.